Hello and welcome. In today's video, we are going to look at the first chapter, The Merchant of Venice. This chapter I've divided into five parts. One is the storyline of the chapter, that is the summary of the chapter. And then as we go on, we'll look at other 4 points. This is for the syllabus of first year BA LLB, Law and Literature, as per Mumbai University. This is semester 1. Let's read through the storyline of the chapter, The Merchant of Venice. In this chapter, The Merchant of Venice, the central conflict is the legal battle between Antonio, the merchant, and Shylock, the Jewish moneylender. Antonio has defaulted on a loan, that is, not being able to pay, and Shylock demands the agreed upon penalty, that is, the bond, a pound of Antonio's flesh. The Duke presides over the trial, expressing his sympathy for Antonio but acknowledging Shylock's insistence on pursuing the penalty, demanding the penalty. Antonio, prepared to face his fate, demonstrates a stoic patience, accepting that his life is forfeit, that he is going to die. Stoic means lots of patience. Shylock, unmoved by appeals for mercy, insists on the law's strict enforcement, refusing a monetary settlement or any negotiation. Bassanio, Antonio's friend, offers 6 times the loan amount, but Shylock will not relent, will not give up, does not want to back out. The tension rises as Shylock prepares to cut the flesh, unyielding in his not giving up in his pursuit of justice. At a critical moment, Nerissa, disguised as a lawyer's clerk, enters with a letter from Bellario, a learned doctor from Padua. This introduces Portia, disguised as the lawyer Balthazar, who offers a solution to the case. She argues that while the bond entitles Shylock to a pound of flesh, the letter of the bond specifies no blood can be shed, meaning that Shylock can take the flesh, but if he spills any blood, he forfeits. He has to give up his life and wealth. Shylock, still determined, insists on the bond's strict terms, but when Portia enforces the law, he realizes that his pursuit of the penalty has led him into an impossible situation. Shylock's goods are seized, taken away by the state, and he is forced to convert to Christianity and give his wealth to Antonio and his daughter's new Christian husband Lorenzo. Throughout the trial, the central theme of mercy versus justice is explored. This is the key word, mercy versus justice. While Shylock demands justice according to the law, Portia, in her role as Balthazar, emphasizes that mercy is above the law and that even in the pursuit of justice, compassion should prevail. These are the key words: compassion, mercy, and justice. The chapter concludes with Shylock's defeat as he loses both his wealth and his autonomy, that is, freedom, while Antonio is saved. Key themes of the chapter: mercy versus justice. Portia's argument underscores the importance of mercy in the pursuit of justice. When you want justice, it should be tempered with mercy. Justice has to be balanced with mercy, the quality of mercy. The consequences of rigid adherence to the law. Shylock's refusal to show mercy ultimately leads to his downfall. The role of disguise and deception. Portia and Nerissa's disguises play a crucial role in the resolution of the conflict. Next, let us look at the main character sketch of the different characters from the chapter. Antonio. Antonio, the merchant of Venice, is a tragic hero who is both loyal and self-sacrificial. Sacrificial. At the beginning of the play, he is portrayed as a melancholic figure, but his dedication to his friend Bassanio is evident throughout. He agrees to the bond with Shylock without much consideration of the consequences, driven by his desire to help Bassanio secure his marriage. In this scene, Antonio shows a stoic and resigned nature. He faces the danger of Shylock's bond with calmness, accepting that his fate may lead to death. His willingness to sacrifice his life for Bassanio and his view that this is an inevitable fate reflect his selflessness and devotion to his friends. Antonio's acceptance of his fate and his quiet demeanor during the court proceedings shows his inner peace despite the external chaos. His character represents loyalty and sacrifice, but also a sense of fatalism. Next, the character is Shylock. Shylock, the Jewish moneylender, is a complex and controversial character. He is driven by vengeance and a desire to punish Antonio, who has wronged him in the past. Shylock is relentless, does not want to give up, unyielding, and proud throughout the trial. He views the bond not just as a business agreement, but as an opportunity to get revenge, is the key word, on a Christian merchant. His refusal to accept the three times the money offered to him by Bassanio highlights his obsession with the bond and his determination to exact his revenge. Shylock is not moved by any plea for mercy, even though mercy is a central value in the Christian faith, and his lack of compassion makes him appear cruel and inhuman. His speech defending his actions, in which he compares his desires to those of humans who dislike certain things, like a cat or a gaping pig, reveals his rationalization of hatred and his inability to empathize with others. Shylock's character symbolizes revenge and inflexibility, but also a troubled sense of justice in a world that has often mistreated him. Third, Bassanio. Bassanio is a young Venetian nobleman and a close friend of Antonio. He is depicted as charming, loyal, and romantic. Throughout the play, his relationship with Antonio highlights the deep bond of friendship, but his relationship with Portia introduces his more self interested side. In the trial scene, Bassanio shows great courage and devotion to Antonio, offering to give his own life to save him. He is willing to sacrifice everything for his friend, showcasing his noble nature. Bassanio's character is also reflective of the romantic idealism seen in his love for Portia. Yet his devotion to Antonio demonstrates the depth of friendship he values as much as love. He offers money and even his life, showing a sense of responsibility and a desire to do what's right, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Next is the Duke, the character of Duke. The Duke is the ruler of Venice and presides over the trial in this scene. He is portrayed as wise and compassionate, yet he also has a sense of helplessness when it comes to Shylock's unyielding demand for justice. Although he is in a position of power, the Duke cannot sway Shylock's decision, and his attempts to intervene show his concern for Antonio's safety. He recognizes Shylock's cruelty and expresses sympathy for Antonio, but he cannot force mercy upon Shylock. The Duke represents the struggle for justice in a world where authority and mercy sometimes clash. His diplomacy is evident in the way he tries to navigate the conflict, but ultimately it is Portia, disguised as Balthazar, who takes charge. Fifth, character of Portia, disguised as Balthazar. Portia, disguised as the young Dr. Balthazar, takes on a pivotal role in the trial. Important role, crucial, intelligent, quick witted, and strategic. Portia's character is defined by her sharp mind and ability to think critically under pressure. Her speech on the quality of mercy is one of the most famous passages in the play, and it highlights her understanding of justice and compassion. Portia not only outsmarts Shylock but also exposes the flaw in his legal claim when she points out that the bond does not allow him to take a single drop of Antonio's blood. Her disguise and the lawyer's role demonstrate her resourcefulness, bravery, and a sense of justice as she manages to turn the tables on Shylock and save Antonio's life. Portia's ability to bring about justice with mercy defines her as a strong moral character who is not bound by traditional gender roles and demonstrates agency in a male dominated society. Gresciano, role of Gresciano, the character of Gresciano. Gresciano is a Venetian gentleman and a friend of Bassanio. He is characterized by his loud, boisterous, and a sarcastic demeanor. Gresciano is often the comic relief in the play, but in this scene, his fiery temper and outraged response to Shylock's cruelty shine through. His insults towards Shylock, though harsh and often inappropriate, represent his moral outrage at injustice. Gresciano is loyal to his friends, especially Bassanio and Antonio, and he shows strong emotional reactions to the trial. His exuberant behavior contrasts with the seriousness of the trial, providing a layer of dramatic tension in the scene. Although not as deeply philosophical as other characters, Gratiano's emotional involvement adds to the play's exploration of justice, mercy, and loyalty. Nerissa. Nerissa, Portia's lady in waiting, also disguises herself in this scene as the lawyer's clerk. While she plays a smaller role than Portia, she is a key supporting character. Her devotion to Portia and her role in helping to outwit Shylock show her loyalty and wit. Nerissa's actions, although more subtle than Portia's, demonstrate her ability to assist in the scheme and carry out plans with great precision. Her relationship with Gresciano also offers moments of humor and lightheartedness, balancing the darker themes of the trial. Next, let us evaluate critically the main characters. Antonio. Antonio, the merchant of Venice, is one of the central characters of the play, and his role is crucial in setting the stage for the events that unfold. However, his character is not without controversy and complexity. What are his strengths? Antonio is depicted as a self sacrificing friend. His willingness to risk his life for Bassanio is an act of loyalty and devotion. His calmness in the face of peril reflects his stoic nature, and he accepts his fate with a sense of resignation. What are his flaws? Antonio's character also presents certain moral ambiguities. His deep melancholy in the beginning of the play is never fully explained, but it suggests an emotional vulnerability that may hinder his judgment. His decision to sign the bond with Shylock is reckless and impulsive. By agreeing to the bond without fully contemplating the consequences, he places himself and his wealth in jeopardy for the sake of Bassanio's pursuit of Portia. Antonio's anti Semitic views are also problematic as he expresses disdain for Shylock and the Jewish community, which shows a deep seated prejudice that complicates his character. To conclude, Antonio is a tragic figure whose noble loyalty and selflessness are overshadowed by his pride and prejudices. His character is a study in contradictions. He is both virtuous and flawed, embodying the tension between personal sacrifice and cultural intolerance. Next, let us critically evaluate Shylock's character. Shylock is arguably one of the most complex and controversial characters in Shakespeare's work. His motivations are shaped by personal grievances and a desire for revenge against those who have wronged him, particularly Antonio. What are his strengths? Shylock is a man of principle, and his unwavering commitment to the terms of the bond reflects his sense of justice. Throughout the play, he insists on fairness as he sees it and demands the payment he is owed. His famous speech, "If you prick us, do we not bleed?" humanizes him and emphasizes his emotional pain from years of discrimination and mistreatment by the Christian community. Shylock's character is an embodiment of how social prejudice can transform a person from a victim into a perpetrator of cruelty. What are his flaws? While Shylock's pursuit of justice is understandable, he is often viewed as inhuman. His refusal to show mercy is a moral flaw, particularly given the cultural context of the play, where mercy is seen as a divine virtue. Shylock's rigid attachment to revenge leads him to a self destructive course, and his inability to compromise ultimately brings about his downfall. His desire for the pound of flesh seems excessive and vindictive, and it blinds him to the human cost of his action. Furthermore, his lack of empathy towards others, especially Antonio, makes him appear cruel and unforgiving. To conclude, Shylock is a tragic figure whose deep seated anger and quest for revenge are shaped by years of persecution. He represents the human tendency to be consumed by past wounds and is a symbol of how bitterness and hate can obscure the possibility of redemption. His moral rigidity and inability to show mercy ultimately lead to his downfall, making him both a victim and a villain. Next, let's look at Bassanio. Bassanio is a young Venetian nobleman whose character is both sympathetic and flawed. His primary motivation in the play revolves around love and friendship, but his character is marked by certain shallowness. Let's look at his strengths. Bassanio's loyalty to Antonio is admirable, as he is willing to sacrifice his own well being to save his friend. His romantic idealism is evident in his quest for Portia, whom he values deeply. He is also portrayed as a gallant and brave character, especially when he offers to give up his life for Antonio. Bassanio's ability to secure Portia's hand through the casket challenge shows that he possesses wit and intelligence as well. What are Bassanio's flaws? Bassanio's primary flaw is his financial irresponsibility and his dependence on Antonio for wealth. He is often depicted as a spendthrift and a man of little substance who seems more focused on romantic adventure than on personal responsibility. His selfishness becomes apparent when he spends the money Antonio gave him without thought for the consequences. Although he does express deep affection for Antonio, his motivations for marrying Portia seem somewhat materialistic, as he is drawn to her wealth and beauty. His lack of independence and reliance on others exposes his vulnerability and emotional immaturity. To conclude, Bassanio is a character who embodies both romantic ideals and materialistic flaws. While his loyalty and bravery are praiseworthy, his financial irresponsibility and emotional dependency on Antonio make him a less fully rounded figure than other protagonists in Shakespeare's play. Next, let's look at Portia, critically evaluating Portia's character. Portia is one of Shakespeare's strongest and most intelligent heroines, and her role in The Merchant of Venice is crucial to the resolution of the plot. She is portrayed as beautiful, intelligent, and resourceful. What are her strengths? Portia's wit and intelligence are showcased when she devises the clever plan to save Antonio, disguised as the lawyer Balthazar. Her speech on mercy is one of the play's most eloquent moments, emphasizing a deep understanding of justice and compassion. Portia is also brave and resourceful as she manages to navigate a complex legal situation with calmness and resolve. Her ability to outwit Shylock is a testament to her strategic thinking. What are her flaws? One of Portia's potential flaws is her manipulation of others for her own purposes. While her actions are ultimately in service of justice, they involve deception and disguise. Her ability to deceive Shylock and the other characters can be seen as ethically questionable as it raises questions about authenticity and truth. Additionally, her role in testing Bassanio with the rings introduces a note of control in their relationship, as she seeks to manipulate his actions in a way that may feel less than fair. To conclude, Portia is a complex and empowered female character embodying both justice and manipulation. Her actions bring about the redemption of Antonio, but her use of deception in the pursuit of her goals complicates the ethical dimensions of her character. She represents intelligence, justice, and mercy, but also exhibits traits of manipulation and control. Fifth, the Duke. The Duke is a mediator who represents the voice of authority in the play, overseeing the trial in Venice. He is a figure of diplomacy, but his character reveals some moral and intellectual weaknesses. What are these strengths? The Duke is fair minded and shows empathy for Antonio. He recognizes Shylock's cruelty but is unable to intervene effectively. He represents the authority of Venice but is often portrayed as powerless in the face of Shylock's rigid demands for justice. The Duke's call for mercy during the trial reveals his humanity and concern for the well being of all parties involved. What are his flaws? The Duke is often criticized for his inability to act decisively. He is hesitant in the face of Shylock's demands and is ultimately overpowered by Portia's intellect. His lack of authority in the trial scene and his failure to intervene more forcefully reflect his ineffectiveness as a leader. Moreover, his reliance on Portia to resolve the conflict suggests a certain weakness in his leadership. To conclude, the Duke serves as a mediator who is ultimately ineffective in resolving the conflict. His character highlights the limits of authority and powers and the power when confronted with complex issues of justice and mercy. Next, we'll critically evaluate the chapter Thematic Exploration. The central themes of the play revolve around justice and mercy, the balance between the two, and how they manifest within the legal and moral frameworks. Let's look at justice versus mercy. The conflict between justice and mercy is most starkly illustrated in the trial scene. Shylock, representing justice, demands strict adherence to the law, the bond, while Portia, disguised as a lawyer Balthazar, argues that mercy is the greater virtue. The Duke's appeal to Shylock to show mercy highlights the tension between the two concepts. Shylock, however, is unmoved and remains steadfast in his demand, while Portia's legal maneuvering and the use of mercy to ultimately defeat Shylock's strict adherence to the bond can be seen as both a trump of compassion and a critique of rigid legalism. Revenge and forgiveness. A key element of the play is Shylock's quest for revenge. His pursuit of Antonio's pound of flesh is driven by a desire to get back at the merchant for his past humiliations and the pervasive anti Semitic treatment Shylock endures. His relentless pursuit of vengeance suggests that revenge can blind individuals to moral and practical consequences. His downfall is a commentary on the dangers of holding on to hatred and unforgiveness. However, the play also challenges the audience to consider the circumstances that create such vengeful figures. Shylock's victimization at the hands of the Christian characters, especially Antonio, complicates his desire for revenge, suggesting that prejudice and social exclusion can lead to the rise of animosity. Prejudice is one of the key words. Friendship and loyalty. The bond between Antonio and Bassanio is also central to the play's emotional core. Antonio's unconditional loyalty to Bassanio, despite his financial difficulties, showcases the themes of friendship and self sacrifice. Bassanio's willingness to risk everything to help his friend despite his shortcomings emphasizes the value of loyalty and personal connection. In contrast, Shylock's relationship with his daughter Jessica offers a contrasting view of family loyalty and betrayal. Jessica's decision to elope with Lorenzo and convert to Christianity underscores the play's tension between loyalty and personal freedom. Next, social and cultural commentary. The Merchant of Venice explores issues of anti Semitism, social inequality, and cultural clashes. Shylock, as a Jewish moneylender, is depicted as a figure marginalized by Venetian society, where Christians like Antonio hold societal power. The play reflects the racial prejudices and religious intolerance of the time, with Shylock as a symbol of disenfranchised minority. Anti Semitism. Shylock is subject to both personal and systemic discrimination, which is evident in the way Antonio and other Christian characters treat him. They view him as a greedy, vengeful figure, reinforcing harmful stereotypes about Jews. However, the play complicates this portrayal as Shylock's actions, while extreme, are partly a reaction to the social injustices he faces. His famous speech, "If you prick us, do we not bleed?" argues for the common humanity of all people, regardless of the religion or background. This speech invites the audience to question the treatment of minorities and to reconsider whether Shylock is as villainous as he is portrayed. Yet, Shakespeare's portrayal still reflects the anti Semitic mindset of this time. leaving Shylock ultimately defeated and humiliated. Class and gender. There is also an underlying commentary on class dynamics. Bassanio's reliance on Antonio's wealth reflects the classist structure of Venetian society, where access to wealth determines social mobility. Additionally, Portia's role in the play raises questions about gender roles. Although she is portrayed as an intelligent, capable, and powerful character, she is also constrained by the limitations of her gender. Portia's success in the trial depends on her disguise as a man, demonstrating how women had to navigate a patriarchal society. Her manipulation of Bassanio with the ring challenge also serves as a critique of male pride and vanity, while illustrating Portia's subtle control over her marriage. Literary devices and style. Shakespeare's use of language, particularly his employment of puns, metaphors, and dramatic irony, enhances the complexity of the play. Wordplay and puns. Shakespeare's use of puns and wordplay lightens the atmosphere in some scenes but also deepens the thematic tension. For example, Shylock's discussion of pound of flesh is both a literal and figurative pun, representing both financial gain and the cost of revenge. Additionally, the ring subplot plays with themes of identity, loyalty, and possession, using verbal wit to add depth to the characters' relationships. Dramatic irony. Dramatic irony is used effectively throughout the play. The audience knows that Portia is disguised as a lawyer and that Bassanio has given away the ring that he promised never to part with, but the characters are unaware of this. This creates suspense and tension and enhances the play's comic elements while also emphasizing the differences between appearance and reality. Structure and form. The play is structured around several interwoven plots that tie together themes of love, law, and justice. It shifts between comedy and drama, with moments of lightheartedness contrasting with darker, more serious themes. This balance between comedy and tragedy gives the play its unique flavor, although the darker elements such as Shylock's defeat and the treatment of women and minorities leave a moral ambiguity that prevents the play from being purely comedic. Next, moral and philosophical questions. The play raises several moral and philosophical dilemmas. What is the true meaning of justice? Shylock's rigid demand for justice contrasts with the mercy shown by the Christians. The play suggests that mercy can sometimes serve as a higher moral standard than strict adherence to the law. What is the value of revenge? Shylock's vengeance leads to his own downfall, suggesting that revenge may be self destructive and that forgiveness could be a more just and beneficial path. Is the play anti Semitic? While Shylock's portrayal reflects the prejudices of Elizabethan society, the play also invites reflection on the nature of discrimination and the treatment of outsiders. What role does love play in social justice? The relationships between Antonio and Bassanio and Portia complicate the play's broader themes. Love appears to be a redemptive force in the play, yet it is also entwined with self-interest and materialism. Okay, now let's go on to the 20 most important quotes: who said, to whom, and the context from the text. First, the pound of flesh which I demand of him is dearly bought. It's mine, and I will have it. Speaker is Shylock. It is said to Antonio and the court. Context. Shylock says this during the trial scene when he demands the pound of flesh that Antonio promised as collateral for the loan. This marks Shylock's insistence or demand on the strict terms of the bond, focusing on justice without mercy. Second quote. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? Speaker is Shylock. He says it to Salanio and Salarino, and the court. Context. Shylock says this famous speech during a conversation with Salanio and Salarino, defending his humanity after being taunted by the Christian merchants. He argues that Jews are just as human as Christians and should not be mistreated simply because of their faith. Third quote: the quality of mercy is not strained, it dropped as the gentle rain from heaven. Speaker is Portia. It was said to Shylock. Context was Portia, disguised as the lawyer Balthazar, says this in the trial scene, urging Shylock to show mercy. She argues that mercy is a divine quality, this is the key word, that should be freely given, not coerced by the law, not forced by the law. Fourth quote: I am a Jew. Hath not a Jew eyes? Hath not a Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, affections, passions? Speaker is Shylock, and it is said to Celerio and Selenio. Context is Shylock delivers this speech to express his anger and frustration with how Jews are treated by Christians. He argues that Jews are human beings and deserve equal respect, using rhetorical questions to emphasize that Jews have the same physical and emotional experiences as Christians. Fifth quote: if to do were as easy as to know what were good to do, chapels had been churches and the poor men's cottages princesses' palaces. Speaker Portia to Nerissa. Context: Portia says this to Nerissa as they prepare to leave for the trial in Venice. She reflects on how difficult it is to act according to good intentions, comparing the ideal world with the reality that one must live in. Sixth quote: but love is blind, and lovers cannot see the pretty follies that themselves commit. Speaker Jessica, to whom? Lorenzo. Context: Jessica says this to Lorenzo as they are preparing to elope. She remarks that love often makes people blind to their own foolishness, reflecting on her own actions of stealing from her father Shylock. This is not a part of our text, but I've still considered it here. My daughter, this is also not part of the text. My daughter, O my ducats, O my daughter, fled with a Christian, O my Christian ducats. Speaker is Shylock to his servant and later to the audience. Context is Shylock says this after discovering that his daughter Jessica has eloped with Lorenzo and stolen his money. It highlights Shylock's anger at the betrayal and his frustration with the loss of both his wealth and his daughter. Eighth quote: how far are we from Venice? Speaker Bassanio to Antonio. Context: this is also not part of the text if you have read it. Context is this question is asked by Bassanio as he and Antonio travel toward the trial, reflecting their sense of urgency and the impending nature of legal dispute involving the bond. Ninth, I will have my bond. Speak not against my bond. I have sworn an oath that I will have my bond. This is part of the text. Speaker is Shylock. The Duke, he says this to the Duke and others at the trial. The context is that Shylock is adamant, hell bent upon, about claiming the pound of flesh from Antonio as specified in the bond. This shows his unyielding nature and commitment to exacting justice. Next, but I do fear you speak upon the rack where men enforced do speak anything. This is not part of the text. Speaker is Gratiano to Nerissa. Context is Gratiano makes this remark during the trial scene, implying that he does not believe Shylock's legal claim is genuine, suggesting that Shylock's insistence on the bond is driven by hatred and revenge, not justice. This is not part of the text. Next, 11th, a pound of flesh to be by him cut off nearest the merchant's heart. This is part of the text. Speaker is Shylock. He says this to the Duke and the court. Context, Shylock reiterates the terms of the bond, specifying that he demands a pound of flesh from Antonio's chest. This is the crux of the conflict in the trial scene, where Shylock seeks legal retribution for the wrongs done to him. The devil can cite scripture for his purpose. Speaker is Antonio to Bassanio. Antonio says this as he criticizes Shylock's use of legal arguments, suggesting that even evil can be justified by the right manipulation of words or logic. This is a comment on Shylock's interpretation of the bond. Next, Portia, I like not fair terms and a villain's mind. Speaker is Bassanio to Portia. Bassanio says this when he speaks to Portia after their marriage. This is not part of the text. Reflecting on the tension between appearances and reality, he suggests that beauty and fairness should not mask a corrupt or malicious nature. All that glisters is not gold. This is not part of the text, so I'm skipping this. You that choose not by the view, chance as fair and choose as true. This is also not part of the text. In sooth, I know not why I am so sad. This is part of the text. Antonio to Selenio and Celerino. Antonio speaks this line early in the play, setting the tone for his melancholy. Despite having everything, a successful business and a good friends, he is inexplicably sad. This introduces the central conflict of his character, which is later revealed to be tied to his love for Bassanio. Bassanio, the best is most temperate. Speaker is Portia to Bassanio. This line is spoken after Bassanio chooses the correct casket and wins Portia's hand in marriage. It reflects the ideal of moderation and balance, virtues that are central to their relationship and the play's moral themes. This is also not part of the chapter. This is part of the chapter. Thou shalt have justice, more than thou desirest. Speaker is the Duke to Shylock. The Duke speaks this line during the trial scene, suggesting that Shylock will receive a form of justice through the strict adherence to the bond, but in a way that will ultimately not favor him. This line foreshadows Shylock's defeat. And yet a fool, in love I would not change. Speaker is Bassanio to Gratiano. Bassanio expresses this sentiment in the play's early scene. This is not part of the text. Reflecting his devotion to Portia, his words reflect the notion that even though love often makes one foolish, it is a state you would not wish to escape. 20th, I am dumb. Speaker is Shylock. He says this to the Duke and others at the trial. Shylock says this after he is deprived of his bond and forced to convert to Christianity as part of the judgment against him. It signifies his complete defeat and the stripping away of his wealth and identity, leaving him with no recourse for justice. This is part of the text. With this, I end the chapter here. Thank you very much for listening. Do share it with your college groups and friend groups if possible. Thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.